So hello everyone, welcome to another round of our New College Summer Welcome. Today we're speaking about mock lectures and transition to lectures at the university level. We're so blessed to have Dr. Alexandra Garrison here to speak to us. And so with that, I'm going to turn my mic off, my video off, and I'll let Alex take it away. Alex, it's all yours.
Okay, so let me just make the screen bigger. So hopefully this helps you. Hi everyone. As Todd mentioned, I'm Dr. Alexandra Garrison. I've been teaching at U of T for about 12 years now. I've been at U of T a bit longer than that because I came here to do my PhD. And I've been teaching at New College specifically for the last 10 years. At New College, I teach in the International Foundation program, and I coordinate the New One program, which is a program for first-year students at New College. And maybe towards the end, I can tell you a little bit more about that program. So my lecture today comes out of discussions we have at New One around issues of the relationship between global forces and local issues today. So if I can just go back here, just give me a second. Let me go back to this slide. And we often in New One and also in my own world history course, we talk about globalization a lot. But all that we say about globalization we have to rethink a lot of our discussions after the spread of COVID-19 this past year. It has affected all of us, right? And it certainly has an impact on the issue of globalization. So the central question that I'm going to be exploring with you today is, what is the impact of COVID-19 on globalization? But before we can talk about that, we will have to think of a couple basic concepts, right? And one of them, obviously, is the issue of globalization. So you see on the screen that globalization is going to be one of the things we're going to discuss. But globalization is a big topic. We don't have all day. I could stay here for hours and hours with you and we wouldn't talk about everything related to that topic. So I had to choose a focus. So I'm going to focus on the issue of food and focus on the examples of Canada. Okay. The way this is going to work today is, I mentioned already, the two things you're going to need is one, to check the chat once in a while. I pasted a link there to the Poll Everywhere site. You probably don't see anything there yet. Todd is going to repaste that link. If you need it, you just ask in the chat and Todd can paste again. And we're going to use this tool to get you to participate in this class. So it's not just going to be me talking a lot, but also I want to hear from you. So let's just test to make sure that works. Okay, so if you click on that Poll Everywhere link, I'm going to turn on a question now. You're going to see a map. Now the map is going to look small. It won't be able to zoom into the map, but you can click anywhere in that map. And basically I'm asking you to let us know where you are right now. Okay, and it can be rough, right? It's not going to be perfect. So if you can click somewhere in the map, if you go to that pollev.com/Dr. Garrison, you should be able to see this. If it's not working, Todd will tell me. We will see if anyone pops in here. So you go to that link, you should be able to see this. Oh yeah, someone clicked, so it is working.
Yes.
So just click where you are on this map, roughly. Right? You can't zoom, and I know if you're looking on a phone, it's very frustratingly small. Okay, I see some people in the same time zone here. Someone moved. Some on the West Coast.
We have some comments in
Yes.
the chat, Alex, that are having some
Yes.
issues. The error reads, excuse me, I just scroll because it went. So the page you're trying to reach isn't here. Is it Dr. Garrison or is it just your last name?
Oh, it's that exact link. So
Yes.
polev.com/drguerson.
Okay, the original, thank you, Sahil. I'm doing the correct one there. So the link we had before didn't have doctor. There we go. So that should be better for folks if you want to give that a shot right there.
Yeah, so if you post on that link, you also have it on top of this screen. You may be able to see, I'm not sure, but there's a respond at polev.com/drguerson. Oh, I can see people are coming in from many parts of the world. Oh, I see someone from Brazil. Hello. I'm also originally from Brazil. Okay, so we are in every time zone. Good night to those that are in China right now. Excellent. So this is clearly working. It's nice to see so many people from so many time zones. So this is how this poll everywhere will work. And we're going to use it in a minute for another activity. Let me just go back here. And hopefully those that weren't able to access before can access it now. Okay. So globalization. Okay, let's spend a couple minutes thinking about that. What is globalization? So one thing I want you to do right now, maybe you have heard this word, maybe you even studied in school, maybe you haven't. I want you to think about 2 to 3 words that you associate, that you connect with the word globalization. Okay, so even if you don't know exactly what it means, if you think about, just think of globalization, what do you think it means? Can you try to guess? Can you connect 2 or 3 words with that concept? So think about 2 or 3 words. Okay, so I'm not looking for a definition. I'm looking for a word that you connect to it. And what I want you to do, now that you thought, or maybe 2 or 3 words, I want you to go back to that link for the poll everywhere, or stay there, right? And I want you to enter those words onto the answer there, but enter them individually, okay? So that they will show here as individual words. And then we can see what do you all think about when you think about globalization. As you can see, there is some similarities in the responses here. People thinking about international, okay. Thinking of the world. Let's see, immigration. The same world for everyone. Interesting concept. I like that. I'm going to stop this in a minute. Okay. Let me just stop responses just so we can see what we have here. Okay. International is one term you all had in common. Going into the chat now, what do you think is a common element of all of these suggestions? Let me see. I see international. I see interconnection showing up here. There's interconnectedness, interconnected, connections. There's lots of different words that mean a similar thing, right? Integration, interactions, connectivity. We get a sense here. See, development was a term that showed up. I don't see now so much, but technology is a term that shows up. Multinational, Trump. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But there's also a sense of maybe a progression here. I see advancement as a term here. This is an interesting one. So, okay, you all suggested words you connect to it. Let's see how similar you are to maybe some definitions that we find if we then decided to do some research. Maybe you were asked to look up the concept of globalization. And then you go and you go to look up some definitions, right? And I know the first stop that a lot of people have is Wikipedia. And if you checked Wikipedia in August of 2018, it defined globalization as an international integration that has developed from increasing human connections. Now, if you checked Wikipedia again last year in 2019 or this year, it hasn't really changed between last year and this year, I noticed. It defined it a little bit different. It says it's the process of interaction and integration among people, companies, and governments worldwide. As a complex and multifaceted phenomenon, globalization is considered by some as a form of capitalist expansion, which entails the integration of local and national economies into a global, unregulated market economy. So I can see here there's a development from an idea of a broader idea of human connections to a more specific idea of economic connections, right? In the second definition here. But this is from Wikipedia, right? And the problem with Wikipedia is that you can't really tell who wrote what. So then it becomes a little harder for you to use these definitions in proper academic work. So then you have to look up some other sources. So let's take a look. You'll find this article by some British political scientists and economists, and it came up about a little over 10 years ago. And they define globalization as the accumulation of links across the world's major regions and across many domains of activity. In short, globalization is about the connections between different regions of the world. And these connections can be cultural to criminal, financial to environmental, so any kind of connection, right? But it's also about the ways in which these change and increase over time. And some of you use this sense of increasing and developing over time as well in some of your answers. So this is what some British political scientists and economists have said about globalization. Then I look at a very popular book about globalization written by a Swedish journalist. And he describes it as the process of world shrinkage, of distances getting shorter, things moving closer. So basically the increasing ease with which somebody on one side of the world can interact to mutual benefits with somebody on the other side of the world. So this is in a way a little similar to that first Wikipedia entry where we're talking about human connection, right? Very broad definition. Now the book that I use in my world history class, written by Robert Stray and Eric Nelson, two historians, define globalization as a thick network of connectedness or entanglement. They like to use this word entanglement because it has more of a sense of everything being sort of tied up together, like in ways that are kind of hard to pull apart, right? And this network can be characterized in several ways. You know, there's many different elements to it. Some elements have to do with the increase of international trade. Other elements have to do with flow of ideas and cultural patterns. So this can be anything from like intellectual ideas, but also fashion, the way we dress, the food we eat, the way we enjoy passing our time, the sports we watch. Like the cultural patterns can mean a lot of different things. The large scale movements of people, but also the global spread of diseases. And this is an element here we're going to be talking about today when we deal with COVID-19, right? Now we see lots of definitions, but one way I explain this to my own students is, that's important to think about when we think about globalization is this element of the connection between the local and the global, right? So if you think of economic terms, the economy, well, the economy is not naturally global, right? We have a local economy. So you have a village or a town. Maybe you produce all the things you need. Maybe you produce all the food you need. Maybe you produce all the goods you need, right? So you have a local economy. Now this local economy, if it's just local, it will only be affected by things that happen locally, right? So if something happens on the other side of the world, nothing really happens to that local economy. But once that local economy becomes global, becomes interconnected with a global economy, then it becomes influenced by what's happening elsewhere in the world as well. So it's this connection between the global and the local that is an important aspect of this story. Now let's pause here for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to step out of this lecture on globalization to talk a little bit about lectures in general and lectures at university. Now, I gave you a bunch of definitions, right, in this lecture on globalization. So my question to you is, why didn't I just choose one definition and presented that? What is the point of presenting so many? Do I just want to confuse you? Is that what the point is? Why not just give one definition of globalization and we can move on? Does anyone have any suggestions? You can type in the box. You can unmute yourself. I'm curious to hear what you have to say. So I have an answer here. They all discuss globalization from different aspects. Okay, good. Anybody else has a suggestion? There's no standard answer. More definitions could show different people's perspectives. Cultural, economic. There are many different answers to defining it. Okay, excellent. Now, what if then we're at the end of the course and we have an exam and I ask you, what is globalization? What do you do? Do you give one of these definitions? Do you choose one? What could be, how would you approach that answer, that question? If you were asked then to define globalization. Okay, so John tells us you can choose any definition provided you justify it. Okay, this is one approach, yes. You can form your own understanding. You'll pull ideas from each, integrate them into your own answers, yes. Here is where, if you really want to rise to the top, and I'll say two things. One is, part of the reason why I give you so many definitions is, yes, as you can see, there are different perspectives, there are different answers, but part of the purpose here is for you to understand that this is something that there is an ongoing conversation about. Okay, and this is with knowledge in general. Any topic you're going to study at university is part of a larger conversation. And when we talk about research, when we talk about scholarship, what that means is there are larger conversations about those topics, right? So in that sense, when you come to university, the expectation is you are going to participate in those conversations. You are going to be creating knowledge yourself. This is why I stopped and asked you, what do you think about this topic? And then I gave you some definitions. And because what I'm trying to do here is help you to build your own knowledge about it, but also understand that there is a larger conversation about it. So when you're asked to define, really one thing you should probably do is to explain that globalization can be defined in many different ways, right? That political scientists, historians, journalists, they're all going to approach it from different angles. And so you can give examples. So for examples, you can then use some of these definitions as examples to illustrate the main point, which is that there are different definitions of it. But they also have some common elements, right? So if you looked at all those definitions, we noticed that there are common elements. Whether they stress the economic aspects, whether they stress political aspects, they all have this sense of interconnection as part of them. So one can say that, yes, there is a core element to the definition of globalization. So it's not that there are no answers or there are many answers. There are some core elements that are common to all of them, right? But the basic idea is that you understand that there's a larger conversation about it and there are people going to define it in slightly different ways. We're cool with that? Okay. So let me just make this a bit larger again. I can't see your chat now, but Todd will tell me if there's anything that I need to answer right away. Now, another aspect of globalization that I wanted to talk about before we move on to talking about the present situation of COVID is that the term globalization in the media, in international relations, we also use it to talk about the huge increase in international economic transactions that happened in the last, I would say, 70 years, since the end of the Second World War. And at the center of these connections is the development, an increase in size of multinational corporations or transnational corporations, depending on how you define it. Some of you mentioned that in your own suggestions for words you connect with globalization, right? And these have been very important in a lot of the ways in which we're connected around the world. So since I'm going to be talking about food today, I thought I would use this example, this chart that was created by Oxfam, in which we look at the items that are available in the grocery store. And particularly here in North America, this would be definitely the case. So when you go to a grocery store, they're very large. There are tens of thousands of products in it with many, many different brands, right? So it looks like there's a lot of diversity. But when you peel behind those labels, you can connect them to very few companies that own most of these brands. There's about 10 companies that control a lot of the things we buy. So let me give you an example here of Coca-Cola. I have a whole lecture on Coca-Cola in my world history class. But just to give a quick example here, we have Coca-Cola, which is a very old company, created in the late 19th century. And you start with one local company that is created in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States, to produce one product. Coca-Cola, right? And as it grows and spreads and consolidates, it will acquire different brands, acquire different companies, diversify itself. So then it expands into that market of beverages, right? So for example, in this box here that you have Coca-Cola in, these are so other soft drinks or pop. So you have Coca-Cola, but then you also have Sprite and Fanta and Barks. So you can see it buying different kinds of soft drinks, the competition, right? But as the market changes, then these companies have to change and adapt, right? So for example, we start to ask, well, maybe soft drinks are not that good for you. Maybe we should drink juice. Juice is made from fruits, right? Fruits are good. So maybe juice is better. So we see an explosion in the market for bottled juice. So Coca-Cola doesn't want to lose market. So it acquires a bunch of fruit and juice making companies. So Minute Maid, Fruitopia, also iced tea companies. So it starts also acquiring companies that work on that area. So they have this box here of all that type of beverage. But then we realize, well, juice is actually not that better, much better. Juice has sometimes more sugar than soft drinks. So, oh no, you know, if you drink a lot of juice, you can also get diabetes. So that's not good. Maybe we should drink water. So Coca-Cola buys a bunch of water making companies, not making, but water bottling companies, right? So you see here, Dasani, Bonaqua, these are all water, bottled water. So he sells a lot of those. But then the environmental movement comes around and says, well, bottled water is bad for the environment because we can get clean water right from the tap. We should just have drinking fountains everywhere. So suddenly we start becoming, there's negative ideas about bottled water. So at the University of Toronto, we banned the sale of bottled waters. We start encouraging students to bring their own bottles and refill them in stations around campus. So bottled water, maybe not that popular. Okay, so we can't justify just putting water in a bottle, but maybe if we make that water special, we can still do that, right? So then we have the invention of things called vitamin water, or my favorite, smart water. It's just water. But we call it smart water, and then people may buy it because they think it's different from the water that you get from the tap, right? Or sparkling water as well. There's a whole bunch of companies there. So you see what I mean here. You have one company that suddenly takes hold of all of the different aspects of one market, that larger market of beverages, non-alcoholic beverages, right? So you see a similar kind of development in every market. And with a lot of the business that looks like you have 10 or 20 different kinds of brands here, but they all kind of are owned by the same corporation. So this is an aspect of globalization that I wanted to talk a little bit about. Now, the other side is as these companies grow and acquire other brands and spread around the world, their potential size and revenue growth, right? So there are organizations around the world that, for example, compile lists of the top 100 economic units. And these lists used to be mostly countries would be in the top 100 economic units. But lately, there's been more and more corporations making into these lists. So here is an example of the latest of these top 100 economic units. I believe the data for this list was from 2018. And here we have, and the way they define these economic units, they compare the revenue of countries. So this is the amount of money a country may raise through taxes, and the revenues of corporations, which is the revenue that they get minus the profit. And there used to be mostly countries in this list, as I mentioned, but right now the list is of the top 100 has 71 corporations. So 71% of the top 100 economic units or corporations, not countries. So if you zoom into the top 20 roughly that I can zoom in here, we can see that we have a corporation now in the top 10. Even as early as 3-4 years ago, there were no corporations in the top 25. Now we have several. So Walmart is the first one there. So the Walmart makes more money than the country of Spain or Australia or the Netherlands, or another way to put it, there's only 9 countries in the world that make more money than Walmart. And if you look here, the difference between Walmart and Canada is not that big. So this gives you a sense of just the growing influence that corporations can have. Now, this is an interesting thing for those of you that perhaps are going to study really anything, but certainly if you're thinking about the world, if you think about international relations, right, we tend to think about countries negotiating things, coming together through institutions like the United Nations or the World Trade Organization, or all these different organizations that the members are representatives from governments around the world. Now, corporations are becoming bigger than countries, but somehow they're not part of these international organizations, right? They kind of function outside a little bit of those. So that is something that will be an interesting thing to see in the upcoming years, and how it's going to work out. Are we going to have world relationships being dictated by the influence of corporations? That's a big question. We're not here to answer that specifically, but we are here to think about what does this all mean in terms of COVID-19. We already talked about globalization being deeply connected to the issue of how connected we are, right? So let's take a look at food. Now, like every aspect of our lives, food is obviously something we all need. So before there was a global economy, there was, you know, a local food economy. The first civilizations were built after the invention of agriculture. So you always had a local food system. This local food system has become a global food system, right? Where we have a lot of things interconnected there. Now, there are researchers around the world working right now in big projects studying the exact impact of COVID-19 on supplies, on food security, which is a concept related to our access to food. In fact, one of our professors in the New One program is part of one of these studies where he and others are looking at the impact of COVID-19 on access to food in many cities in China. And they're expanding that study to include cities around the global south. And one of the things that we talked about when I discussed this topic with him is that access to food has been impacted through many ways, right? There are disruptions to the food supply chain, including in terms of agriculture. the processing of food, transportation, and even consumption. So I'm only going to give a few examples of how that works out here in Canada. Okay. Some of my comments apply to other parts of the world. So for example, in terms of agriculture and the way we produce food, a lot of modern farming relies on using chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and there has been disruption in the production of these things. So factories that produce pesticides and chemical fertilizers had to close because of COVID-19 spread in those factories. So in some regions, they closed down. In other regions that they didn't close down, they can't get the pesticides and the chemical fertilizers out of the factory into the market because roads are closed or borders are closed. There's been many disruptions in the ways we are connected, right? So that means you don't get those inputs in the farm. It means that maybe you're going to grow less food, and the farm itself are going to be affected by the way it can distribute the food, because the same road closures that prevent you from buying the chemical fertilizers are the same ones that might prevent you from selling the stuff from your farm. The other aspect that is a very important one has to do with processing. So let's say your farm has animals, you're in the meat market, right? So that means you need to send your meat to be processed in the meat packing plant. Now, there's been a lot of cases here in Canada and in other parts of the world of these meat plants being affected by coronavirus outbreaks. So that interrupts the production of meat in those factories. Sometimes they had to be closed. So this is the particular news of one of these events in Quebec, but there were others in Alberta, for example, here in Canada. Now this potentially affects all of our food supply, because one aspect of the globalization of the food system is that we see more and more consolidation of these markets. So for example, meat production. Now we have been producing meat since there's been human life, right? But traditionally this was done in small local slaughterhouses. So your meat plants were small places locally. There were thousands of this in any country. So you have your cows, you take them to some local slaughterhouse where they only process, not that many a day. It's all small businesses, right? Now, with the growth and consolidation of this industry, what it means is these small places have been disappearing and being replaced by very, very large plants. So in a country where you used to have tens of thousands of slaughterhouses, now you may have 10. Like in the United States, where all of the meat packing industry is owned by 4 companies. Canada is not very different. So the problem here then is that you're relying on giant plants that process millions and millions and millions of pounds of meat. Now, for years and years, critics have pointed out the problem of that system, in that, any kind of potential harmful bacteria or infections in the actual meat or vegetables or plant or that are being processed in these plants can affect millions of people, because everything is in one building, right? So one sick cow going into a giant plant like that can potentially contaminate millions of people. And when they were small, these slaughterhouses, you have one sick cow, you potentially only contaminate maybe 100 people, like a small number of people. It's much easier to contain, right? And here we're talking about contamination in terms of the meat being produced there. But with COVID-19, we're talking about disease among the workers. So these are giant operations with lots of workers in it, working close together, often sleeping in close quarters. They're mostly often migrant workers, sometimes workers who are not legally allowed to work in that particular place. So their conditions are not the best. You have one outbreak in a factory shuts down. Now, if you only have a handful of these factories that are responsible for entire access to meat, or access to meat is compromised. The same thing goes for producing the work in the farms itself. Many countries, and Canada is included here, rely on the work of migrant farm workers. What this means is Canada doesn't have enough people here willing to work in farms. So we recruit farm workers from many countries. People come from the Caribbean, people come from Mexico, people come from other parts of South America, Africa, different countries in the world, and they're allowed to come here and work in the farms for a period of up to 8 months a year. And then they have to go back to their countries, then they come back the next year. And conditions in these farms are not always the best. Sometimes they all have to live together in closed facilities. And what we're starting to see is a lot of these farms are having outbreaks of coronavirus. And that's a big worry. Like if you look at a map of COVID-19 cases in Ontario, some of the areas with the highest numbers are not like places like Toronto, but outside the city, in the areas where we have larger farms, they're relying on migrant farm workers. So that is a problem as well, because that can affect the production of these fruits, vegetables, meat, all the food we eat. It also affects the way these can be sold. Now, it can affect food prices, right? Because if you're producing less, the prices are going to go up. But if you're also going to spend more money, maybe to keep your workers safe, maybe they have to all sleep in better conditions, maybe you have to have fewer people working in the factory at one time. Like there's all kinds of things that you need to do to be compliant to health regulations that can increase your food prices. So we start seeing food prices go up. And this is something that's happening not just here, but in other parts of the world as well. And we obviously going to see that the people that are most affected are going to be people that have a low income, or people for whom it's harder to go to different places to try to find food, right? Other things that can make your food prices go up is panic buying. It's particularly now in the age of social media. It's very easy to stories to circulate, and suddenly there is the notion that something is going to run out. So everybody runs and buys as much as they can from the store. Now, grocery stores, they have a very tight way of organizing their stock, right? And they know how much people buy of all the different things, so they can keep the stock just enough to keep the shelves going. So every day they rely on more stock coming in. So if we behave in an unpredictable way and just start buying more of any one thing, we can run out of that very quickly. And we saw that at the beginning of this pandemic with the run on toilet paper. Did you remember that? For some reason, I think people assumed, I don't know, toilet paper was going to run out. And everyone started buying huge amounts of toilet paper. And then you couldn't find toilet paper anywhere, or paper towel. when you did find it, they were expensive. There was the same thing with disinfectant wipes. You couldn't find those either. And some people were buying all of the ones they could find and selling them on YouTube, on eBay or Amazon for higher prices. So that can also affect, our access to things. Is this the panic of buying things that you feel you're going to run out. These are just a few examples, and I don't want to end in negative way, right? Humans adapt. We find new ways of doing things. So with COVID-19, we had to socially isolate. Stores became a little bit more difficult to go to because you don't want to run into too many people. It was sometimes harder to find the things you wanted. So some people started then buying groceries online, which is a service that have existed for many years, but definitely the demand for that service have increased. Here in Toronto, for example, there are several services that offer subscription to a box of vegetables and fruits. So instead of going to the store and buying it, you subscribe, and every week you'll get fresh vegetables and fruit delivered to your door. So the one subscription system that I have, I talked to them and they said that their demand for their system has increased 800% since COVID-19. Luckily, they were able to adapt. They hired more drivers, they hired more staff to process the subscription boxes, and they were able to offer the service to more and more people. So it may be that we are going to change the way we do things, the way we shop, the way we, and so it's not necessarily all bad news. So for example, people that used to fight for many years for the increased condition for migrant farm workers are now finding people willing to listen that, yes, we need to increase conditions for farm workers because of COVID-19. So we may see some changes happening there as well. So I just want to finish here with a few words in terms of this lecture and transitioning to university. We already talked a little bit when we discussed definitions of globalization, how, you can't just stop at one answer. And I would say you shouldn't stop at the first answer you get. That what's really going to make a difference for you is asking questions and moving on beyond that first answer to more answers. And I won't lie to you, it can be frustrating. I remember when I started university, I was very eager, I wanted to learn, and I had a lot of questions. But often, when I would ask my professors a question, the professor would turn and say, well, it depends. What do you think? And that was very frustrating because I'm asking the question. If I knew what I thought, I wouldn't be asking the question. And part of the reason is that, it's about working that muscle to try to come up, think about the evidence you have in front of you and trying to put it together. And this is what you're going to be pushed to doing. So a lot of your professors won't necessarily give you answers that you're looking for. And the more you study a subject, the more questions you're going to have, not necessarily the more answers. So if I can finish with one quick plug, is for you to look at opportunities. Like all the colleges have a College One program that gives you small classes where you can have a more supportive learning environment, where you're trained to then think about, asking these questions and tackling these ideas in a more interactive way, because that is going to be key. Even in your large classes where you don't have much chance of interacting, the way you show a higher level of learning is by being able to show that you understand that these things are complex. So if you want more information about that, we can definitely answer questions about it. But I think you heard enough from me. And I wasn't able to look at the chat until now, but I can go look through it. But I wonder if anyone has questions, comments, anything they want to know about this experience here today. So we have the chat. And if people want to unmute and say something in with the microphone, that's fine too. If there's anything you're particularly worried about lectures at university and you want to ask, you can pop it in the chat. Otherwise, yeah, like Todd says, if you have questions about lectures in general, feel free to ask. I should say that this year is going to be a bit different from usual, right? Because you're going to have a mixture of different experiences. Some classes will be like this, where you're going to be online, but there might be opportunities for some in-person classes as well. Okay, so Eliza, sorry, I pronounced your name wrong, has asked about the New Colleges One program. Yeah, so all the colleges have a One program, what they call, right? So there's New One, Trinity One, Vic One. And what they all offer in the New College One in particular is small classes. We're capped at 25 students per class. And what these courses allow us to do then is more of this interaction, more of these discussions, more of a chance for you to explore something in a bit more depth. And we are in the middle of planning the program for this year. There will be 3 courses in the fall that you can choose from, 2 courses in the winter, and you register for them when you choose all your other courses in July. So if you have questions about it and we can't answer here, you can also email us at that email address or go to the website at uoft.me/new1. I'm going to type that one.
I got it. There's also lots of questions in the chat, which is awesome. Do you want
Okay.
me to if you can walk through it?
Great, okay. The BR requirements, most of the new one courses, definitely all the ones in the fall, are BR number 3, okay? And one of the ones in the winter, the new 114, is the BR number 1. So you can definitely use them for breadth requirement. Labs, I'm not too sure about if you mean the science labs. I am sure you're going to be given some information about that. I think they're working on how to do those labs remotely as well. What the university has guaranteed is that people can do, I think, pretty much nearly all their courses online. So I'm sure you're going to be given information about that. Is it common for lecture slides to be shared with students before the lecture? It varies a lot, and what I would suggest, if you don't see that happening in a course that you're in, feel free to email your TA, which is the teaching assistant, or your professor with that suggestion. It's a good practice. I do it in my class because my students have told me they find it very helpful to be able to review the lecture slides before class. So feel free to email your professor. Don't be intimidated. You can be very polite, you know, dear Dr. So-and-so or dear Professor so-and-so, I am in your class and I really want to be super prepared, and it would be really great, very helpful if we could see the slides ahead of time. It helps us take notes. You know, you can give them very real reasons why you want to see those slides ahead of time. And I think maybe those who haven't thought about doing that are going to think, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And you can do Flick and one program at the same time, yes. Will most virtual lectures have polls, questions throughout, similar to the ones we did earlier? They can, and this is something that we are exploring in, you know, all of your professors this summer are preparing to teach online. And some of the suggestions that they're being given is how to then interact with their students more. So polls obviously is a popular thing to do. So you may see that happening. I think it depends on the course and the content of that course, but we're going to see people doing creative things. Now, this is going to be a first time for you to being at university studying this way, but I think that it's also going to be a first experience for a lot of your professors as well. Can you participate in the one program as a transfer student? Email us and we can talk about that more specifically to see what your case is. New one is open to first year students only, but there's been some cases of transfer students that have been able to join us. Will the one program require students to attend in person? No, there will be some spots for in person, but most of the spots will be online. How will they accommodate for different time zones? Well, I can talk about my classes and the classes in new one. We're going to make sure that all the activities we do live, we also have recordings that will be shared so people can access them at different times as well, when it's not possible to schedule something at an earlier time like we did today. So there will be some effort to accommodate people in different time zones.
I can help here on this one, Alex.
How is UFT handling the 14-day quarantine for the fall? That's a good question. I don't know that I can answer that one.
I can help a little bit. Sorry, folks, I'm just jumping in here. Sorry, Alex, for cutting in. Also, at the beginning, those that joined late, so I'm Todd. I'm the Assistant Dean for Student Life at the new college. So essentially, what's happening right now with the 14-day quarantine, they're still navigating what that process will look like, but that is something that we're going to have to do, especially for our resident students. Students living off campus, we're going to have to give some directives for, but won't have necessarily the housing or the spaces to do that. But the directives for that should be coming out, we're hoping, by the end of July or toward later July. We're also waiting for this directive from the university on that type of question. So that one is a non-answer, but knowing that there will be
there will be clarification about that.
Yes.
And of course, since we are saying that we're going to accommodate people being able to access online, obviously, if you have to do a 14-day quarantine when you get in here, you can still access your courses online, and you won't have to wait for that. Now, a very important question is how we should take notes during a university lecture. Excellent question. Now, there will be one of the things, you know, I have colleagues who teach note taking. We all take notes differently, right? And especially if you're coming from a different country where you speak a different language, that's going to be a little bit different for you. I came to Canada from Brazil, where we speak Portuguese. And even though my English level was good, when I sat in my very first lecture at university, I was used to taking notes in my language. So note taking wasn't a new thing for me. But when I sat in that very first class and took my pen and listened to the professor, I realized I did not know how to take notes in English. And I did not know that I did not know that. I just assumed it would be the same thing. You understand things, you write them down, right? But then when I was writing things down, I realized I didn't know how to abbreviate things in English, which is like you have to write things fast. You can't write all the words, and I froze because I didn't know how to abbreviate. And I was afraid if I abbreviated words, I wouldn't know what they mean later. So it was a very jarring experience for me. Of course, I then learned and came up with my own techniques to do it. So I would say one thing, especially if you speak a different language, is to prepare ahead of time. So the more you know about the topic of that lecture ahead of time, the better you'll be able to know what to focus on when you're taking notes. So in some cases, you're going to see lecture slides being shared, right? Take a look at those. That will give a sense of the structure of the lecture, of any words you may need to know. In some cases, there will be assigned readings that you have to do before the lecture, maybe some pages of the textbook. Read those if you can, because that will help you predict what it's not that professors are going to repeat the textbook, but they will be talking about that topic. And if you already have a basic understanding of that topic, you'll be able to take better notes. So it's going to change a bit from class to class, I would think, but try different methods. If you're struggling particularly, try to reach out to the Student Success Center. There's many offices at U of T that offer tips as well on these kinds of things. And if you look online as well, they would have tips. I remember looking up how to take notes, and then there's different kinds of suggestions and techniques you can do. Some people find it easier to take notes on a laptop. Some people find it easier to take notes by hand. At the beginning, you'll take some tests to find out what works for you.
And sorry, cut in, Alex. One thing I would also suggest, I think could just be a little more specific, is we have learning strategists
Yes.
located at New College as well as throughout the university, and they're an excellent resource that really helps work with you to develop your strategy for learning. And so that really includes note taking, and we'd highly recommend those. There's going to be a point for them.
It's a great suggestion. So New College has a learning strategist. So this is not a person you go only if you're having trouble, right? This is a person you go to plan your year, really. I've had a student come to talk to New One once, and she was in 4th year. And she knew 4th year is going to be difficult because she's going to be applying for jobs, doing all kinds of different things at the same time. So she booked a learning strategist appointment so they could plan how to tackle that year. So they can help you with your time management. They can help you with your studying. They can help you with things like note taking, like anything related to your learning, really. So they offer really good help in that way. So if you want to know how to contact them, the registrar's office and Orso would be places that can connect you with the learning strategies. Go ahead.
So sorry, Alex. So the email, if you have any questions about anything really about these sessions and stuff, so my email is new.studentlife@utoronto.ca. You can write to me, say, hey Todd, I'm Alex and you were talking about this. Can you give me more insight? And next week we can answer your questions.
Yeah.
2 last things, Alex. We have to, I know we have a lot of great questions here and I don't want to end people, but I also realize we have to get into a session we have.
Right. We have another event at 11 and we don't want to keep you online for the whole time. Just one last question here, because someone asked about tests and midterms in the one program. We don't have exams in the one programs per se. A lot of our work is based on assignments and very active kinds of participation. But we can talk more about the specifics of courses and that if you contact us. And you saw the email I posted earlier. And there'll be sessions for course selections later on. And de nada, Mateus. And yes, so I think I'll stop here because I'm mindful of the time, it's 10:38. We want you to have a break because at 11 o'clock, Todd has another session with you. Right, Todd?
We do, and so maybe I'll pivot with that. So first off, Alex, I want to say thank you so much to you for making the time on a weekend, on a holiday weekend for some folks, taking the time to connect with us, talk to our students, model what a lecture can look like, but also have some really important pausing and annotating for like the why. And I think that was really helpful for some of our students to kind of hear from a professor how this actually works. So thanks so much for your time today, your energy, your efforts. Grateful and appreciate you so much. In terms of the next steps for folks, just so they know, if this is your first session you've attended, That's okay. We've had 2 previously in previous weeks, but we record them all just like we're recording right now. We also have one more session that will begin at our time is 11 a.m. Eastern. So that'll be in about 21 minutes time. I'll put the link to the Zoom call in the chat here before we close, but that will be a session called Academic Support at New College. And so that's taking actually what we're talking about here a little bit further. There'll be introduction to our librarian, or librarians, introduction to our writing center at New College, as well as another professor and then a student who's in some of those classes as well, an upper year student. So it'll be a little more of a panel-based discussion, but a lot of those questions that you're asking here, we can also bring up in that kind of
So they would be great people to talk about these like note-taking strategies and any other kind of academic question you have. They would be able to point you in the right direction in that. So I strongly recommend you attend that section.
Exactly. And so with that, what I would say is, and I'm going to, Alex, if you don't mind stopping sharing for one moment.
Yes.
And I'm going to bump over. Perfect. Thank you. And I'm just going to pull up really quickly the Zoom. Actually, you know what? Better yet, I'm going to put it in the chat. Probably easier to do. So I'll get off my phone right now. But yes, the next session for that, if you do follow us on Instagram, you'd see that. If you have looked on the presence piece, you'll see that. Alex, that message was to me directly, just FYI.
Yes, I know, I saw that now.
And so the meeting ID for the next session, I'm going to read out loud, but I'll also type it in the chat. So it's 815-1729-3262 is the meeting ID. And then that's the meeting ID. And then the password will be 2QW, excuse my slow typing here.
Is there a link that we can paste?
There is. I'm gonna put the link there as well. But yes, I wanted to kind of get that for folks so they can kind of tune in to that.
Best of luck with everything, everyone. It was great meeting you, even if I don't see you personally here. I hope to see you virtually, perhaps in other instances on campus this term. It was a pleasure, and I will bail out. And I left the email there to the New One program. If you have questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And have a great day.
Awesome. Again, Alex, thank you so much. Alex is one of our best professors we have at the college. I love working with Alex, such a great collaborator and a great person to kind of navigate, welcome new students with. So appreciative to have you here. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you, hopefully tune in about 19 minutes to that, the account or the login I put there. It'll be a worthwhile conversation. We'll talk to y'all soon.
And would there be links on Presence for the session at 11?
The link is on Presence. The link is on our Instagram.
Okay, so if you missed anything here, you can find us for there. Excellent.
Yes. Thanks so much, everyone. All the best. Take care.